last week, and I told you before, I like to watch the news. I like to find out what's going on in the world, or at least try to. They were reporting about a story that I'm sure that a lot of you have probably heard about, if you keep up with current events. And it was a story about a homeless guy named Johnny Bobbitt. If you haven't heard the story, then I'll try to fill you in the best I can, or at least what I know of it, because it seems rather confusing. It seems that there was this young lady named Kate McClure whose car stalled out of gas near where this guy was panhandling. And she was kind of in a bad area of town, and he was concerned about her. So this Johnny Bobbitt used his last $20 to buy gas for this lady's car to get her on her way. And in return, McClure and her boyfriend set up a GoFundMe account. And for those who are not on Facebook or don't know anything about it, that's kind of a thing where you can go online and you can donate money to a cause. The GoFundMe account for Johnny Bobbitt raised $400,000, which in my mind, not being critical here, that's an awful lot of money to hand to a homeless guy, but I think he would have been content with a lot less. Sometime last week, a judge ordered the remaining money that was left be given to Johnny Bobbitt because this couple had been withholding the money, citing drug use and poor management. At one point they said they gave him $25,000 and in 2 weeks it was gone. They first reported that there was about $200,000 left in an account for him. McClure and her boyfriend appeared on Megyn Kelly's show and said that they had received death threats for withholding his money. They maintained that they didn't spend the money on themselves, but they were only working to try to get him away from drugs. Now later developments, which was Thursday of this past week, their lawyers say that there is no money. All the money's gone. Apparently the couple who raised the money for this homeless veteran spent it all on lavish vacations for themselves. Now I don't know who's at fault here, and I'm not here to pass judgment on it, but it seems to me, if I understand this right, that the couple probably in the beginning had good intentions, at least in the beginning. Now it seems that their gesture of kindness will kind of be forgotten with the legal battle, and they're talking about possible criminal charges against this couple. What maybe in the beginning was what was a good thing is now a slap in the face to all of those people who donated. The people who donated and raised this $400,000 to help this homeless guy out. And I really kind of hate this. I hate this happening. It's difficult to get people to donate anyway, especially to something that they don't really know a lot about, because a lot of these people, I'm sure 99% of these people had no idea who this homeless guy was. And then you have a story like this when two people apparently took advantage of the kindness of those that were concerned for this homeless veteran. And it just hurts everybody. It hurts all of us. So what's really intended in the Bible when it tells us to love our neighbor? Is it just enough to think that, hey, we're just going to set up a GoFundMe account for this guy and let other people give to it? Is that what's meant by love your neighbor? Maybe they should have first spent a little time getting to know this guy and find out what might happen if you hand him $400,000. Was drug abuse a problem that they might have tried to seek help for before this thing became the ugly ordeal that it is? I'll read to you from Romans chapter 30. Oh, we got to do our video first. Got all carried away in the Johnny Robbins story. I forgot my video. Play it, Penny. Yeah, if you didn't guess it by now, the sermon's about love. Loving your neighbor. All the Bible, if it could be condensed down into one thing, it would be about love. And that's what Jesus said. So we're going to read this one from Romans 13. Romans 13, 8 through 10. It says, owe nothing to anyone. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't have to give anybody anything except for your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law. For the commandments say, you must not commit adultery, you must not murder, you must not steal, you must not covet. These and other such commandments are summed up in this one commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to others, so love fulfills the requirements of God's law. I think Jesus loved simplicity. Sometimes we like to take something and make it into something difficult and this and that, but I think Jesus just loved the simplicity of saying, if we love one another, everything else will take care of itself. So we're going to talk a little bit about love, not the romantic kind of love that you feel for your husband or wife, but the love that we should feel for one another. And not only one another as it pertains to this congregation, but for all of humanity, all of God's children. So we're going to look at why should we love? Why should we love anybody? Well, Leviticus 19:18. We're going to go way back in the Bible, in the Old Testament. It says, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Where do you think Jesus got that? Jesus was an expert on the old scriptures. That's where Jesus got it. Love your neighbor as yourself. We should love because we're commanded to. I really don't know how many places in the Bible, how many times that it tells you that loving is just implied. And we sometimes find that difficult. We sometimes find that difficult because we're so self-centered. I was reading an article the other day when a person becomes a Christian. You know, when you really become a Christian, you get into the church, one of the first things you probably want to learn is about the Trinity. You know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You know, that was, in the very beginning, was kind of difficult for me, you know, learning about the Trinity. But after you're in the church for a while, you begin to learn about a new Trinity. You didn't know there was another Trinity, did you? How many knew there was another Trinity? A second Trinity. You know what the new Trinity is in the church? It's called me, myself, and I. And that, unfortunately, it sounds like a good joke, but it rings true more often than you think. We all have preferences. That's normal. It's normal to like one thing, not like another. I think God knows that. I think God knows that we all have preferences. We all like to have things our way. That's why in His Word He tells us over and over and over again, love one another. He's constantly reminding us. He's constantly hitting us over the head with us, drilling it into our brains to put one person's wishes, another person's wishes ahead of your own. We don't do that nearly enough. The Apostle John even implied to us if we can't love each other, if we can't love each other first, we can't love God. He said in John chapter 4, he says, we love because He first loved us. Whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And He's given this command. Anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. Love is the foundation that every bit of our belief should be built on. Every single thought that we have as a Christian should have love as its foundation. If we're basing our lives or our faith on any other emotion, we're not on the correct path. Next slide. Who should we love? Now here's where it really gets difficult. You thought that part was difficult. What did we read this part? Leviticus 19, 9 and 10 says, when you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It's the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that fall to the ground. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. I began to use quite a bit the Living Translation of the Bible. But as in every translation, I don't think they always get it right. The scriptures that we just read from 1 John back earlier said, whoever does not love a fellow believer, instead of saying brother or sister. The whole world is our brother and sisters. We're all children of God. But I think to narrow it to a fellow believer is not exactly right. We get the feeling sometimes, and sometimes scriptures like this, promote it, that we're only supposed to love one another, meaning people in the church. I've been to a few churches in my time, and as I've said before, they all say they're a loving church. But it just mostly means that they love one another. It's true. We should love one another. I'm sure not every person in here loves everybody else. That's something that we as a body just live with. But we should love one another. Can't argue with that at all. Galatians 6:10 says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. we're especially supposed to love one another. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end with just the people sitting in this room today. Jesus said many things. He never implied that we should only care for whoever's in the church. In John 15:17 says, this is my command, love each other. He didn't say just the people in the church. He says, love each other, love everybody. Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 4:9, but we don't need to write to you about the importance of loving each other, for God himself has taught you to love one another. God teaches us to love one another. People, everybody. Jesus even went on to prove in the parable of the Good Samaritan that God is pleased when someone would reach out to show mercy no matter who they are. The Samaritans were hated by the Jews, but in Jesus' parable, he showed that man to be a neighbor by helping the injured Jewish traveler. This is how we're supposed to love. This is what pleases God. This is who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to love the people that we come in contact with. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what nationality they come from. It doesn't matter their culture. It doesn't matter if they say grace before their meal or they curse at their dog. We're supposed to love them. They're our neighbors. And we need to show love. So how do we love? Luke 6:27, Jesus said, to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. That's a tall order, isn't it? What does that preacher mean, telling me to love my enemies? Not the preacher that told you to do that. It's Jesus that told you to do that. I started out this week talking about a homeless guy. I know you probably don't see it much around here, but I've been to places where it seemed as though there was a homeless guy sitting on every corner. And they're all pretty much the same, you know. They usually have their little cardboard sign and says they need food or they need money for such and such or wherever. And usually down at the bottom of the sign it'll say, God bless. And I'll be honest with you, to civilize people, and I'd say that we as a church are civilized people. Some of them look pretty rough. Some of them smell even worse. I've been in a convenience store when a homeless guy would walk in and just take your breath away. Now this is not the time or the place to argue over whether we should give a handout to a homeless guy or a person. That's for another day and another time, but I can say this. I've given handouts before because I believe there are people out there that need it. And you know what? I don't always know who they are. Some people would say, oh, well, they just need to get a job. Well, that's easy for most of us. For any of us sitting here this morning, that's probably pretty easy. Just go get a job. people living out on the streets that don't have the social skills or the mental capability to work a regular job. And there are people out there that just like it. That's what they want to do. They don't want to live any other way. They feel burdened by responsibilities and things that most of us just kind of take for granted. And they're happy. And they're satisfied with life. Now, if they can sit on the side of the road and somebody give them a couple of bucks. You see, we have a funny tendency as people, as what I would call normal people, that we think that everyone has to be like us to be happy. That's the furthest from the truth. So no matter how unpleasant the person is, no matter how different they are from you, you still have to love them. What did our verse say back in Leviticus 19? Leave some grapes for the poor and the foreigners living among you. Scripture doesn't sound like it was too concerned about where a person may be from. It doesn't sound like it's very concerned about the color of their skin or their nationality or whatever. It doesn't sound like it was too concerned about where they were raised, who their mom and dad is or isn't, or if they know their mom and dad. It just tells the farmer plainly, when you harvest, don't take it all. Leave some of the crop for those that are in need. If we skipped on down a little in chapter 6 of Luke, Jesus continues in verse 35, and he says, love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. You see, I believe that Jesus Christ called us to love unconditionally. That's the problem with this couple that was helping the homeless guy. They saw that he was using this money for drugs or whatever, and they decided that they would save him from himself. They see this guy taking drugs, and we'll just keep this $400,000 for ourselves because he's just going to spend it on drugs. That's not love, that's control. Love accepts people where they are. Love says, even though you may not be like me, even though you may do things that I don't approve of, I'm still going to love you. Love says, I can pray for you. Love says that I can pray that your life will change for the better. But it also says, if it doesn't, I'm still going to love you. I love you because you're God's creation. As well as every person that woke up in a hospital room this morning, not knowing if they would ever step out again. As well as every child that sits in an orphanage this morning and wonders if there'll ever be a family that will come and accept them into their home. As well as every person that struggles with addiction and promises themselves that someday it will all end. I love all these and more because my Jesus loved all these. I think He loves us even more when we're at the worst moments of our life. He may not approve in what we do, but He still loves us. He still waits for us to come back. He waits for our return. Do you feel love this morning? Or do you have somebody on your heart that maybe you pushed aside because they didn't conform to your standards? If that's the case, I ask you to come and pray. I ask you to come and pray this morning that we might accept people like Jesus did. I ask you to pray this morning that you can show unconditional love in your life just as Jesus did. But if you are that person, if you are that person that's been pushed aside and judged, I ask you to come and pray. Come and pray with me. God's church can be a light in your life. God's church can be a refuge for you.